Mēs esam nonākuši līdz mūsu konferences pēdējai noslēdzošajai runai, un puišiem tur bija kaut kāda nepareiza skaņdarba. Es teiktu, mūsu konferencē neviena prezentācija, neviena nepareizais skaņdarbs, tās visas bija vietā, un tās tagad brīnišķīgi apkopos un ieliks tādu treknu punktu mūsu noslēdzošā prezentācija. Es pat esmu nedaudz satraukusies šo cilvēku piesakot, jo man tiešām ir liels gods un prieks jums stādīt priekšā cilvēku, kura darbs un kurš ir atstājis paliekošu nospiedumu, varētu teikt, pēdu visā vides un ilgspējas jomā, jo tas ir Mathis Wackernagels, zinātņu doktors un līdzautors ekoloģiskās pēdas konceptam. Un es domāju, visi mēs esam dzirdējuši par to, kas ir ekoloģiskās pēdas koncepts, jo es zinu, ka to šobrīd gan izmanto uzņēmumi, gan arī māca bērnu dārzos. Wackernagel kungs aicinu uz skatuvi un liels paldies, ka varējāt ierasties Rīgā. So the floor is yours, you can come up now. And I just wanted to mention that the ecological footprint is one of the indicators in the Latvian Sustainable Development Strategy, and it's one that we have not really reached as we should. So maybe your presentation will shed some light on it. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to be cared for so well. I even got some lotion for my voice. Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you. I'm Mathis the robber, like Robin Hood. I'm robbing you of the break, as you know, because I thought it wouldn't be healthy to have a cigarette break in between, so it's much healthier just to sit here. And so you have to just breathe in your seat a little bit. And also 2 warnings before we start. It looks like I'm going to talk about forests. I thought I would have to put a little bit of a forest picture in here. It will be Forest Plus. And then also because when you see winning strategies, some of you may expect I'm going to give you some good recipes what to do, and I will disappoint you. Actually, I don't even believe that solutions are that helpful of a concept, because solutions don't have a subject. Who does the solution? And then we think the solution just kind of neutralizes the problem. It's probably more helpful to think of responses. What is your response? And what's the context? So what I will talk more about is what context do we live in, so you can make better decisions, because you know your situation much better than me. Don't cook my recipes, cook yours. So, what's the issue? It's pretty simple, and we've known that for very, very long, at least since the 70s. Actually, since the 70s, we've known it's not a good idea to emit CO2, but guess what? Since 1970, we have burned 4 times more fossil fuels than in the whole history before. It's like going back to the cigarettes. It's like saying, oh, smoking is not so good, and then you produce 4 times more cigarettes. You know, something is not right. So, yes, I think most people realize the really underlying challenge is that now we, as a species, with our demands on nature, have become larger than what Earth can renew. And why are we not acting? Because we know this is excessive metabolism. And I think the problem is we don't see an opportunity in it. You know, we say, oh yeah, we know, but by knowing that, it's just a burden. Where can we see the opportunity? And I think that will be the context. And it's built on the inside by somebody who wanted to become governor in California about 100 years ago. And what he's known for most, I think, is this quote, to recognize that if your salary depends on not understanding, it's just very hard to understand. Which just means if your interest is not aligned, why would you act? Why would people take on a burden? You know, so that's really at the bottom of it. Or to say it differently, Because probably you can change the world a number of ways. Some use guns. I think that's what we don't want to do. Some have a lot of money to bribe. Maybe we don't have that money either. So we are in the information business. We have information we think may help change the world. And I realized I didn't do it right because I had some information, but I thought it was a gift. Most people thought I brought them thorns. So, so now thinking about what would make information into something that is transformative. Obviously, I think it has to be factual, because if it's not factual, it's wrong. So it will be found out eventually, even though now we're in a time where facts don't seem to be so important, but still, eventually it's going to be found out. Another thing that also seems quite obvious, things have to be relevant, because otherwise they're irrelevant. So it's helpful to be relevant, and then you have more impact. But that's not enough. Perhaps the most important thing is that things have to be empowering to those who receive the information. Otherwise, they will fight it. And it's even going a step further. If you want to make information paralyzing to make sure it never happens, it's exactly the same thing again. If it's disempowering, the more you make it factual and the more you make it relevant, the more you can expect resistance. So the empowering part is really core. And I will talk about that in the second part of the presentation. First, I'm going to talk about the relevant and the factual, and then you'll think, yeah, it's hard. Where's the opportunity here? But for you, it's going to be very easy, because what I'm going to talk about and what I've been working on for a long time, that's why I don't have that many here anymore, is based on what foresters know. You can use more than what nature gives, and you deplete forests. So how do we apply that to the global scale? It's a recognition that in the end, the most significant resource of all is regeneration, the ecosystem's ability to renew, to use photosynthesis to kind of provide the food for everything else. Regeneration is the outcome of conditions. If the conditions are right, or economists would call it production factors, if the climate is right, the soils are right, etc., the outcome will be more regeneration. And it is the mother of all resources, because regeneration determines how much food, how much timber, how much fiber we can generate. But it also limits the amount of fossil fuels we can use, because there's too much underground. If you burned everything already found, it would become very uncomfortable for humans and other mammals to live on this planet. So the limiting factor again is how much can the biosphere absorb of the excess CO2, so the habitat stays well. And so there's a competition. We could absorb more CO2, there would be less space for carrots and forests and other things. Now, even there's a very good plot that they called it rare metals. Have you heard of rare metals? Rare earth. People think, oh, that's the most rare thing. Yeah, they are rare. They are rare, but they are more underground than we can use. What's even more rare is the energy we have and the ecosystems we are willing to destroy to get to them. So also the access to minerals and metals in the end is limited by how much of nature we're willing to give up. So also in competition. So in the end, all these things compete for the same thing, regeneration. What biomass or life is able to provide, plant life particularly. How do we measure it? I don't need to tell you. Your profession has done that for a very long time. Essentially, it's a question of comparing how much nature can provide with how much we take. Now, how much can nature provide? We have one planet. It's called the biggest farm in the universe, at least in the known universe. And about a quarter of the surface area of the planet is ecologically highly productive. There's also life on the rest of the planet, but it would take more energy to harvest it than you would get back, on some level. So a quarter is practically available to us. And we can also, look at how much we use. That's what we call ecological footprint, because the spatial dimension, how much of that space is necessary to provide what we use. Now, we can make that more numerical for those who like numbers. I do like numbers. I can read a numbers book and I get very excited. Some of you maybe too. We have about 12.2 billion productive hectares on this planet. We are over 8 billion people, and so per person there's about 1.5 hectares of ecologically productive space on this planet. We can compare that with our demand. These are global average numbers based on UN statistics. We use all the available UN statistics. The global summary is that we use more than what we have. How is it possible? Again, don't have to explain that to foresters, but also we can emit more CO2 to the atmosphere than is being absorbed. We can fish more than fish can regenerate. We can pump more water out of the ground than is being recharged, etc. We can use soils more rapidly, etc. And the soil overuse, for example, is not even included in these numbers. So this is a conservative estimate. It's higher than what we have. You can compare here, like it's kind of easy to see the difference. And we measure it in a common unit. I showed that once to a banker, and I said, this is the currency we use, global hectares. It's not just the hectares themselves, but adjusted for their productivity, their inherent productivity. Global hectares becomes the currency of the future. And he said, yeah, it's not just the currency, it's the only currency backed up by reality. So that's true. So that's basically the unit on which we depend. Now that becomes the unit with which we can compare things, and we can then do this calculation. I showed you numbers. We have 1.5, but we use 2.6 global hectares per person. The ratio is 1.8, meaning we live as if we had 1.8 Earth, or we use 80% faster what Earth provides than what we need 80% faster what Earth provides. We can translate that into time, and that's with money the same thing. If you spend your money that you earn 80% faster than what you earn, by July 24th, you would have kind of used up the annual budget. And on July 25th, when you open the fridge, if you had bought beer before, there's still beer in there, because we can live off depletion. It's just a mathematical average, but it just means from then on average, we live off depletion. And then you could go one step further. There may be some people here that also realize there are some other wild animals around. We're not the only wild animal species. They also need food. They also like space. Ecologists, some of them would say maybe using half of the planet's capacity would maintain a high level of biodiversity, probably 85% of what we encountered in the beginning of 100 years ago, and also would be good for climate. So if you just would use a half, that would be ideal compared to what we use right now. That's about 3 times less of the global metabolism. Where's the opportunity? You see, I haven't seen people going very excited and say, oh my God, it's the greatest opportunity since whatever. You can find out more about this here, and we can probably send out the PowerPoint later on if you like to find these. And we can go to Latvia. And for Latvia, I think the data is not that clear. We use about 15,000 data points per country and year. And particularly smaller countries with large trade flows get a bit distorted on the consumption side, because we measure how much is being produced and then how much is being traded. So, and then what you produce minus what you export plus what you import, that looks like what you consume in the country. It's not exactly precise, but it's a good first approximation. What we know pretty for sure, like if you look at the biocapacity, that's a more robust underestimate of what you have. You have about six times more biocapacity per person here than the world has per person. You're damn rich. You're among the richest in the world. Now on the demand side, I don't know if that's true, if you use that much. So if you look at the chocolate cake, how it has developed, we have only data since 1992, for obvious reasons. But so the forest part, the green part, seems quite large to me. And it could well be that it's hard from the trade data to know how much of the processing is done here for exports that's actually not your consumption. So it may be a bit of excessive. But countries that have a lot of forest, they tend to use a lot of forest products too. So I don't know how much it is a distortion or how much it is reality. That would be something interesting to find out. But that's kind of the situation here. Now you still say, where's the opportunity? You haven't heard opportunity yet, you know? So, oh, it's not, okay. What's the upside? Now a cheap way of saying what's the upside is to say, because I went to a dinner and somebody said, let's not talk about this anymore, there are children around. I said, that's odd. Because there's no downside to better understanding your context, because you can make better choices. Yeah? So it's a good thing to understand the trends. You can orient yourself better. I would like just to give 2 more examples, because we have a little bit of time still, and then we can have conversations. 2 examples on what are the upsides. And I'm going to start with the economic implications. The economic implications of not addressing overshoot is that you will inevitably, as we have experienced in the oil crisis, get into stagflation, meaning that it gets more and more difficult to fill the stores. That means things get more expensive. And also, if we continue like that, we have more and more economic activities and industries and infrastructure that will not be able to operate in that future, will be less valuable, will provide less jobs. So while things get more expensive, we'll have less money to earn, you know, and then it's getting more difficult on both sides. That's if we don't react. Market failures are damaging to the world as a whole, because they don't balance out what automatically should be balanced. Let's take a bakery. If you have too few bakeries, bread gets too expensive, people come to the idea, oh, let's become baker, we produce bread more, and then the price of bread goes down. So there's this invisible hand that does magic things that balances out the price of bread. With resources, it doesn't seem to be the case at all. As we said before, we are now using 3 times more, it's 3 times more if we say what we use globally compared to what may be a healthy amount. But not only that, it's not just how much more we use now, it's the debt from the past that continues to accumulate. It's like a bathtub that we're filling up, for example, with greenhouse gases, and then that's what we have to keep dealing with. That's why the future is coming towards us faster than we may expect. So what's the market failure? The market failure is that it doesn't regulate this overshoot dynamics. We are even so blind, I don't know if Latvian has a word for overshoot. My mother tongue is German, there's no word for overshoot in German, really a good one. And I don't know any other European language where there is a good word. So we have a disease we don't even name, and we don't have a therapy for it either. But anyhow, that's a market failure. The market failure, then you can say, is the following. It's very simple to say, okay, how much higher would the price need to be for what nature provides so that the demand would go down to a level that Earth could maintain? And if you look at oil only, for example, if they produce 1% less oil, because we're so dependent on oil, the price goes up 3 to 10%. It's called very inelastic. And if you look at all the resources we depend on, it's also super elastic, because we need food, we need we need clothes, etc. So you cannot just move out. Oh, let's not eat for a year. It's not that much of an option. Anyhow, so that shows that the price would be incredibly high, probably so high it would collapse the global economy. That means the economy as it is now is unstable from an ecological perspective. What's the good news here? Here's the good news. Those countries who are resource rich, you're leaving enormous amount of money on the table. Enormous amount of money on the table. How do we capture it? I don't know. But I can tell you there's a very big part that you leave on the table, and that's where I think it's worthwhile to bring your intellectual capacity and Latvia's capacity together and say, that's what we need to figure out. Given overshoot, what's in the economic interest of Latvia? And that's now something that I think, that's now something, we are having conversations more and more also in countries in South America. It's the richest continent on the planet. They're starting to realize resources have just been drained, no economic benefit has come back. The world is an overuse of resources. China uses 3 times more than what it has. Switzerland, where I'm from, 4 times more. And they still think, oh, we just have to sell our resources. No, they're at the longer end of the stick, but they have to think through what the opportunities are. Right now, we have, since World War II, I would say, the way the economy has been built is that we have buyer's market for resources. You know, if you, for example, produce strawberries, you have to sell them within 1 or 2 days, otherwise they're rotten, you cannot sell them anymore, so you just have to sell them quickly, you know? And then the cities make wonderful products with them and put names on them, etc., and then they sell them as a seller's market. Like Apple, for example, when they sell you a phone, they don't say, please buy my phone, whatever you're willing to pay. They say 1,000 euros, or you don't get it. You know? So it's a question of confidence as well. And so that needs to shift in some ways. Now, how is that possible? I will just give you some examples of where it already has happened. Cities control brands and most of the value add in the value chains. And there's one product that has done that extremely well as well, linking kind of the land with the product, which is wine. You know? So they can actually, in the end, sell you a bottle, 1 liter of juice for $50 or 50 euros or more. You know? So they have been able to capture a much larger part of the value chain by linking it to the land. Similar things have happened, but not as extreme, but moving in this direction in the coffee market, you know, where you start to get interested, where does the coffee come from? Or also in the chocolate market. That just before, I'm from Switzerland, we said Swiss chocolate. Now we're starting to realize the cacao beans are not grown in Switzerland. So what does that mean? I also know from the coffee market, farmers are starting to kind of gather together to say we need to build more of the value chain. We need to own the roasteries, you know, so that we can then reap much more from that value chain, and they make a much larger cut then than if you do fair trade, which is nice, but then still has a lot of effort and not so much goes back to the providers of these resources. So I'm just giving that as an example of pathways towards that huge gap between what the resources are truly valuable, if you think from a market failure perspective, and the market failure will end eventually. Overshoot will end eventually. The question is only how. Does it end by design or does it end by disaster? And ending the market failure by design is one of the greatest gifts we can give to humanity, or you as Latvia could give to humanity. So you thinking about how you can get far more benefits out of the great provision of the services of nature that you provide to the world is actually also a huge gift to the world. Now let's get more micro, because one part is how many resources do you have, how do you manage them? And by thinking about that, people may think, oh, that's so selfish, that's terrible. Like if you have, why should countries then even care that have so many resources? They will just be squandering them. And I remind them also, like for example, Switzerland doesn't have any gold mines, but gathered a lot of gold in the vaults of the banks. And in Switzerland, nobody says, oh, we have so much gold in the banks, let's just leave all the doors open. Somehow, as people have more of something, they even care after it more, you know. So actually understand, it's more about, do you in your guts feel that you are rich? It's not a joke, you know, it's actually, wow, we are rich. Do you feel that in your stomach? You know, because now I've seen ministers, when they hear unemployment goes up, they truly have like sweat pearls coming down their face. It's like they can feel the pain. When you tell them you're running an ecological deficit, they say an ecological what? And they like move on to the next thing. It's not, they don't feel it, you know, and in the end, money is just a symbol that gives us access to the physical things we want. We heard about the 50% of GDP. Actually, I would say, yes, it's more than 50%, 100% of everything depends on nature. We see that now with the digital economy. You know, now artificial intelligence, suddenly we need to build like super energy intensive data centers. Like even the digital world is incredibly resource intensive and resource dependent. So what does it mean at the macro level? I don't use the word sustainable that much anymore, only in the sentence of saying I don't use sustainable that much anymore. That's when I use the word sustainable. But otherwise I would rather say, what's going to be valuable? What's going to be valuable? And not just from in my heart, but I mean in euros. What's going to be valuable in the predictable future? Because the future has never been more predictable. We know that people will want to eat, and they will want to sleep, they will want to be safe, they will want to walk around and move around. And we always knew that. What we also know is that in any imaginable scenario, there will be more climate change and fewer resources in the world. We don't know the exact combination of the two, because it depends on the strategy of our wisdom, how we approach things, but this is inevitable, and as we saw that it's a cumulative issue of this overshoot kind of eating the future is coming so fast, faster than our infrastructure, our supply chains, our innovation can react. So it's not about the future, we're already late in the game in some ways. And so the question really becomes, what is holding value in that future? And I'm giving you a wild assumption. Don't quote me on it, like you have to try it yourself. You believe it or not believe it. So I would say, let me tell you that. You heard it here first. What's going to be valuable in that future? It's going to be things that will be useful. Wow. Wow, huh? Yeah, and I mean, there's some things that also are valuable that are not so useful, Gucci bags, or so some of that exists, but on average, it's the valuable things and the useful things go a little bit hand in hand, So what will be useful? And then now I'm taking another wild step. What's going to be particularly useful in that future? I believe, and that's my belief, but I'm open about this belief, and you should test it yourself. I believe things or businesses, when you have more of them, when you have more of that business, the pressure on the planet goes down. Those will be the most valuable ones. Why? Because they will be needed more. Because they will not run into these constraints that are inevitable. So if you're already able to make money today, imagine how much with such businesses, imagine how much better off you will be in the future. And you will ask yourself, what's that? Is it possible businesses that actually, as you have more of, there's kind of less pressure on the planet? That's nuts. And then you think probably of car companies, you build more cars, takes energy, and you drive the cars, and more energy and more overshoot, So yeah, so mostly, on average, it's not possible. But for some it's possible, and they will be the winners. For example, and I just mean it just to give you an idea of the categories. If you build windmills, it takes resources to build the windmills. They don't come for free. If these windmills displace coal-powered electricity, then overall demand goes down. You can start to distinguish in your innovation strategy what kind of businesses actually operate. This thinking came out of work together with a large company called Schneider Electric. It's one of the larger companies that has a clear focus. Their CEO started to realize that their vision of the future and humanity's need for the future converge, because they are into the business of decarbonizing and digitizing, and that's what's needed to kind of make decarbonization happen. And so they came to the realization, the more Schneider, the better the planet. And that also energized their staff, because they can look into the face of their children and say, we do something good, And so they think they will have a job in the future. And the CEO wanted to know, not for CSR reasons. He realized, because he was an engineer, that the business he was running was a machine. And the machine produces CO2 reduction. And so you want to know physically, is my machine getting better? How much CO2 does it take my machine to reduce 1 unit of CO2? Am I getting better? Because if I'm getting better, most likely also financially, I will stand in a better position. And so we did one calculation to say, what's actually the potential here? So we worked with the engineers of the company to say, if all the existing technology of Schneider Electric that operates like electric systems and smart grids, etc., would be applied at cost. Not just because it's possible, but it also economically would bring a benefit. How many days would it move Earth Overshoot Day? That is now on July 24th. How many days would it move it? And the answer was 21 days. Now, they're not the only one in that business. You know, so there are others, and others may do it even better, so there may be even more days. And then you can calculate how many seconds or minutes do you as a company move that part. And so you can get a sense also strategically, where do I stand compared to all the others. We put together a website called Power of Possibility to Overwhelm, just to give lots of examples. What can you actually do to reduce demand on the planet while also being able to be economically viable? There's a lot of possibilities. And I would say if you're an investor, for example, or why not have such companies in your portfolio? Because if you have gold in your portfolio to balance out the risks and opportunities, you know, for sure you should have things in your portfolio that do better in that future we don't want, rather than worse. So at least as a hedging strategy, to look for companies, and you can calculate it in terms of per $1 million market capitalization, how much are you adding pressure or decreasing pressure to the planet? The question is, if your company did not exist, would humanity be better off or worse off from a perspective of overshoot? So what I try to kind of show you is, I hope to break one of the deadliest misconceptions we carry in society. And technically it would be called free rider thinking. That because we focus so much on climate change, and not just on climate change, but on mitigation, on CO2 reduction, we think that's the entire problem. Because there it's true. If I give up my CO2 emission and have a cold shower, I suffer and everybody else benefits. Why should I give myself up for the rest of humanity? And then we go to conferences and the world says, oh no, we're not ready yet. And then people come home from that conference and say, oh, we didn't, let's wait another year and have another conference. While the reality, the physical reality, is the exact opposite. Here's the best news of overshoot. The less other people do to prepare themselves for the inevitable future, the more you are at risk. Isn't that great news? It is great news because it shows for you to wait for the others is the most stupid thing you can do. It doesn't serve you. It's the exact opposite. You have the choice. You have the choice to prepare yourselves. And Latvia is in a particularly strong position because you are resource rich, so that makes also you have the ability not to be so fearful and really think about it from the two perspectives. What does it mean for the economic opportunities for Latvia, given the context of overshoot? It means on the resource side being able to maintain and strengthen the resources, but also to make sure you have an economy that operates best in that future, and particularly to invest in parts of economies that when they grow, pressure on the planet goes down. You'll be best positioned. That's good for Latvia. And guess what? It's also good for the world. Because deep down, the world doesn't believe yet that we're moving into that world. And I think envy is the best strategy. So look after yourself, and that's helpful. Now, what are the lessons? Briefly summarized, overshoot is becoming a dominant force. And also, reducing overshoot is the greatest value creation. Now I'm talking capitalism, am I? I just say it's measurable, it has a strategic advantage to understand it, and it's as much capitalism as brushing your teeth. You know, am I tooth capital? If I'm brushing my teeth, am I a capitalist? Or am I just taking care of it? Am I a moralist to brush my teeth? Like, oh, it's our moral obligation to brush our teeth. It's an investment in the future of my teeth and of my own life. You know, so in some ways, recognizing physical reality is not that different from brushing your teeth. That's kind of the lesson that I would like to leave, and you're in a very strong position. Now, being in a strong position doesn't mean that you will have winnable strategies, but it's much easier for you to find winnable strategies, and I think one of the big tragedies is that we ask ourselves too little. Not just, oh, do I do the right thing, it's nice, but really asking ourselves, are we thinking about, are our strategies winnable? Because it's not just a game, you know? Your future depends on it. And so I thank you very much also for your great engagement with a very important topic, with the resource, the forest, Forests represent about 40% of the biocapacity of the world. In Latvia, it's about 50% of the biocapacity is forests. So you are really the shapers of the future, and you are standing in a very strong position. I hope we take advantage of it. Thank you so much. No cigarettes yet. You say no cigarettes yet, but just a little bit, and then.
Yes, let's take for a couple of questions. First of all, thank you very much for this factual, relevant, and empowering presentation, and the good news that you gave us, because not very often we hear that Latvia is rich, and also in a way you answered a question that is very present in public discourse.
And the world needs you.
And why should Latvia do something? Because we are not so bad as China or India. So here is the answer. And you have several very interesting questions. And do you think that the currency coverage could be switched from gold to nature resources unit, and that would be a solution?
Maybe one day, but the first thing, I mean, why is gold so valuable? Because people believe in gold. Mm-hmm. The strange thing is we don't believe in nature yet. We think it's just something nice on the side for Saturday afternoons. Yeah, so good.
And also, we have the footprint concept, which has been around for some time. Mm-hmm. We have other science-based facts research, a lot of research about biodiversity issues, about nature resource depletion, about climate change, but still we are not really able to convince the decision makers to make changes. So why do you think is that?
Yeah, I lost a bit my interest in footprint when I started to kind of have too big of a collection of plastic bottles having like footprint labels on it. I thought there's something going wrong, you know. So again, that this misconception. I think, as I said, as long as we don't see the upside of information, we won't take it in. We'll fight it, you know. So I think the hard thing is really, if we want to change something, if we cannot see the clear advantage for the others, we want to engage with it in it, and not just that we see it, but that the other person also see it. It's not going to move things. But the good news is that ecological realities, necessities, and strategic necessities are strategic economic necessities are far more closely aligned than most people think.